Yeah. So as we were continuing, in the previous section, we talked about drug discovery, and now we are talking about the economics of drug discovery. So we said that in modern drug discovery, it is usually capital intensive and a money intensive process that involves large investments by the pharma industry, different I mean the pharma industry corporations as well as the national governments. And as per an estimate, the R&D cost for each new molecular entity was about US dollars 1.8 billion. So this is what we were discussing. And in the 21st century, basic drug discovery research is funded primarily by the governments and by philanthropic organizations. So philanthropic organizations are those organizations which are nothing but trust, which have money with them and they want to spend that money for some good cause. So they will try and invest in drug discovery projects, either with the pharma industry or with pharma academics or maybe with the government. Okay. Whereas primarily the basic drug discovery is funded by government and philanthropic organizations, whereas the late stage development is funded primarily by the pharmaceutical companies or venture capitalists. Okay, so pharma companies, once they feel that this particular project has some foundation in it, some solid output can be expected out of that particular project, then they will think of funding those academic institutions or those government projects further. Okay, because late stage development will involve a larger amount of money as compared to the basic discovery research. So late stage development, which requires larger amount of money to be funded, will be done by the pharma companies or by venture capitalists. Venture capitalists यानी these are organizations which work for investing money. Okay, these are organizations which work for investing money. They may be organization comprising of one person or maybe a larger group of people, but they specialize in investing money. So the moment they find that there is some good project, the good drug discovery project जिसमें से कोई potential drug आ सकता है, and the drug might be worth billions or loads of money later on, then they will invest. तो जहाँ पे लेट स्टेज डेवलपमेंट में ज्यादा मनी की एक्सपेक्टेशन है वहां पे फार्मा कंपनीज एंड वेंचर कैपिटलिस्ट विल कम इनटू द पिक्चर. Okay, and for those disorders whose rarity means that no large commercial success or public health effect can be expected, there are orphan drug funding processes. Okay, तो अगर ड्रग ब्लॉकबस्टर होने हो सकता है, so if the drug that is being discovered may go on to become a blockbuster drug, then the pharma companies and venture capitalists would be interested. But otherwise, if the drug is not going to be a blockbuster drug, then what will happen? Then that drug should be, taken ahead by at least some or the other funding, right? So there, for such drugs, we have something called as the orphan drug funding processes. For example, for neglected diseases, we have a funding called as DNDI, Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative. Okay, DNDI, which is an international organization which does funding for such kind of drugs which may not go on to become blockbuster drugs. Okay, so that is what is the scenario of drug discovery, modern drug discovery. Okay, so to be allowed to come to market, the drugs must undergo several successful phases of clinical trials. So we know there are four different phases of clinical trials. Phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. First three phases are to be done before the drug enters into the market. And once the drug enters into the market, फिर उसके बाद में आता है phase 4. Okay, so that is post-marketing surveillance or phase 4 clinical trial. So there have to be different phases of clinical trials through which the drug has to pass. And further, it has to pass through a new drug approval process, which is called as the NDA, new drug application. Okay, new drug application or NDA. NDA. Okay, so this is what I was talking about some time back when I said NCEs are to be subjected to various, kind of studies, and then they will be approved by the approving authorities, namely the FDA. Okay, after they receive a new drug application from the pharma companies or whosoever is involved in the discovery of that drug. All right, so that is NDA. And once the drug is approved, only then we will be able to call it as a drug. Otherwise, we have to call it as an NCE. Okay. Yeah. So discovering drugs that may be a commercial success or public health success involves a complex interaction between investors, industry, academia, patent laws, regulatory, marketing, and there is a need to balance the secrecy along with communication. ठीक है? तो imagine कौन कौन लोग involved होते हैं सक्सेसफुल ड्रग डिस्कवरी में. सबसे पहले इन्वेस्टर्स, बिकॉज दे आर द ones who are going to invest money, right? Money is important for anything and everything. Then industry, pharma industry is mostly involved in drug discovery. Then academia yani those friends of yours who are doing maybe M.Pharm and PhD in medicinal chemistry or pharmaceutical chemistry, and those of you who are doing M.Pharm in something related to a new chemical entity that might go on to become a new drug. Okay, so that is academic drug discovery. Then patent laws. Once a drug is discovered, it needs to be patented. वरना वो मॉलिक्यूल कोई भी चुरा लेगा, राइट? वो ड्रग ड्रग को कोई भी मार्केट कर देगा, एंड देन व्हाट द नोवेल्टी डज नॉट स्टे विद द person who has discovered it. So intellectual property rights and patent laws have to be looked into. And regulatory exclusivity, like for instance कोई ड्रग है, इंडिया में मार्केट करना है, तो इंडिया में रेगुलेशंस अलग है. बट वही ड्रग अगर यूरोप में मार्केट करना है या ऑस्ट्रेलिया में मार्केट करना है या एशियन कंट्रीज में, डिफरेंट एशियन कंट्रीज में मार्केट करना है, या अमेरिकन कंट्रीज, नॉर्थ अमेरिकन और साउथ अमेरिकन कंट्रीज में मार्केट करना है, तो देन विल रिक्वायर टू स्टडी द रेगुलेटरी नॉर्म्स दैट गवर्न द drug market in those countries. Then marketing. So the strategies for marketing also differ. Okay. So for instance, in the Western countries, we all know that it is the pharmacist who prescribe, right? But in our country, we know that it is the physicians who prescribe, right? Doctors write the prescription. And so the entire targeting, the marketing that is done in our country is towards the doctors, whereas in the Western countries, it towards the pharmacist. Okay, so marketing is done with respect to doctors in our country and with respect to pharmacists in other Western countries. And also there is a need to balance secrecy with communication. Now just imagine, अगर कुछ नया drug invent discover किया है, तो that needs to come in to be communicated to the different partners, right? IPR के लिए, regulatory के लिए, marketing के लिए, investors को बताना पड़ेगा, right? So इन सब के बीच में communication होना जरूरी है, but at the same time secrecy of communication also has to be maintained. If at any point in time the drug gets leaked, information of the drug gets leaked, then the entire drug discovery process goes into vain, right? It goes into drain, as we can talk about it. And then despite advances in technology and in the understanding of biological systems, drug discovery is still a lengthy process. It is a capital and expensive process, and a capital intensive process and an expensive process. Then it is difficult, then it is inefficient process. Inefficient process क्यों बोल रहे हैं? Because many drugs, many NCEs are subjected to preclinical testing and clinical trials. But उसमें से hardly a few percent of the NCEs go on to become a drug, approved drug. Okay. So for instance, Alzheimer's disease में there is 99.99% failure rate. 99.99 नहीं, 99% failure rate. Okay. So if suppose 100 molecules are taken up for clinical trials, preclinical and clinical trials, then of those 100 molecules, only one will get selected and will be approved as a drug. So that high is the failure rate for clinical trials related to Alzheimer's. Whereas for some few other diseases, it is quite high. Like for example, cancer. For cancer, the approval rate is quite high. Okay, so that is something that we need to look into. So the drug discovery, although we say that we are into the modern era of drug discovery, it is still an inefficient process. Okay, it is still an inefficient process, a lengthy process, an expensive process, and a difficult process. Okay, so inefficient process with low rates of new therapeutic drug discovery. Okay, and then if we have to talk about the timelines of drug discovery, then this is the table that we should look into. Okay, so 0 से 1 year के बीच में what is done? Identification of a suitable disease. ओके, यानी कि बेसिकली क्या टारगेट है जिसको अपने को टारगेट करना है, what is that target, what is that biological target that we should try and target. So that is what is done in the first year. Then we have to assemble a multidisciplinary team. So कोई किसी भी टीम में there cannot be only a medicinal chemist, there cannot be only a pharmacologist, there cannot be only a pharmaceutics personnel, right? Or a QA personnel, or a pharmaceutical analysis personnel. It has to be a team. Everyone will look at the same drug discovery process from a different point of view, at the same drug from a different point of view, right? So it has to be a multidisciplinary team. And we have to select promising approach. So what would be a promising approach? Whether we should go for something like reverse pharmacology, or whether we should go for forward pharmacology, which was the previous approach, older approach, right? Then whether we should think about computer-aided drug design or computational chemistry or any other kind of drug design or drug discovery technique. So that is what is promising approach. Selecting a promising approach. Then obtaining satisfactory budget. Investment is absolutely essential. Investors are absolutely essential. Without money we cannot start, right? So obtaining a satisfactory budget and starting with the chemistry. Now we know that medicinal chemistry is the starting point of pharma research. So the first point has to be starting with the chemistry. So we have to think about the natural product sources, synthetic product sources, or maybe purchasing the chemicals in order to start with some kind of chemistry. Then we have to start with the pharmacology. The pharmacology comes in next. We have to devise and perfect a suitable screen. तो हम लोगों ने पोटेंट ड्रग्स डिस्कवर कर लिया, लेकिन वो उनका एक्टिविटी अच्छा है कि नहीं कैसे पता चलेगा? सिर्फ इतने से ही पता चलेगा कि वी हैव टू screen them. We have to have some in vitro or in vivo test so that we can screen those molecules and find out whether they are actually, efficacious or not, right? Then, after screening, we'll be able to find out hits. Okay. Then, in the first to second year, यानी कि 1 year तक क्या करेंगे? We are doing all these things, right? And in the second year, what we'll do? We'll confirm the potential utility of the hits in animals, यानी कि preclinical testing. Okay, we'll go for preclinical testing. So we'll try to find out whether the given hit is potent, whether it is selective, whether it has acceptable toxicity in animals. Okay, then in 3 to 5 years what we'll do analoging around the most promising hits, यानी कि जो भी structure है उसमें we'll try and do some modifications so that we can find out even more promising hits. Okay, we have to ascertain the freedom to operate, that is examine patents and literature. Freedom to operate यानी, say suppose the hit that we are trying to work upon is already reported by someone else in their patent or in the literature, then that is detrimental to our drug discovery process, right? So उस case में we won't be able to look into monetizing by marketing the drug. So इसीलिए freedom to operate needs to be ascertained by examining the patents and literature in the third to fifth year. Okay, then detailed pharmacology, that is finding out the potency, the mode of action, the acute and chronic toxicity, reproductive toxicity, genotoxicity, etc., should be done in 3 to 5 years of starting the project. Then adjust to the absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion characteristics. तो ADME studies जो हैं, absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion studies, that also will do in the 3 to 5 year span, third year to fifth year span. Then we have to devise large scale synthesis. अभी हमने initially जो synthesis devise किया था, that was for small scale. But if we want to market the product, we have to synthesize the API, the drug, on a larger scale, as well as the excipients also on a larger scale, right? So that is to be the methods for synthesizing the molecules on a larger scale need to be devised. Then formulation studies. देखो pharmaceutics वालों का role आ गया. So finding out what formulation is best for the given drug is what is important. So whether it should be given orally or whether it should be given parenterally or by other routes of administration, what should be the type of formulation, that all will be done here under formulation studies. And stability studies. Now, once the formulation is made, it should be checked whether it is stable or not. If suppose we are making a formulation, for example, a liquid oral for solution, example, solution बना लिया, and then उसका stability ही नहीं है, if in that solution the drug is decomposing, degrading, तो फिर क्या फायदा ऐसे formulation का? Then that formulation would be wasteful. तो इसीलिए formulation studies के hand in hand we also have to do the stability studies, and then we have to apply for the patent protection. So after we know all of this data, then we have to apply for patent protection. So just imagine 0 से लेके 5 years तक we have not applied for the patent. The drug discovery company or whosoever in from the academics is working on drug discovery, that individual or that group of researchers will not have applied for patent until the 5th year, right? So that means 5th year तक कुछ भी करके the process has to be absolutely secret. If the structure of the drug or of the hit is disclosed, then we all know if we won't be able to patent it, right? Then 4th to 9th year, phase 1 clinical studies are done for determining drug safety, dosage, blood levels. Phase 2 clinical studies are done for determining effectiveness, side effects. Phase 3 clinical studies are done for determining the range of effectiveness, long-term and rare side effects, etc., etc. Then 8th to 11th year, what is done is regulatory review is taken. So, for instance, as we were talking in the previous slide, if we want to market in the North American markets, or if you want to market in the Australian markets or in the Indian subcontinent, the regulatory or the different parts of the world, the regulatory processes would be different. So, depending on which country or which region we want to market our product into, we should look into their regulatory norms in the 8th to 11th year. 10 to 15th year, look at this. Marketing is done. And then post marketing surveillance and phase 4 clinical studies are done. So that those studies are done to monitor safety, large scale chemistry, distribution, advertising, as well as education. Okay, so 10th to 15th year is when this phase 4 clinical studies are done, and 17th to 20th year may, because the patent is going to expire. We know that patents are granted for a maximum of 20 years, right? So if the company had applied, or if the drug discovery researchers had applied in the 5th year, तो वहां से लेके आगे के 20 years तक they will have the patent, right? तो now as of now we have talked here from the point of view कि अगर zero in the first year में ही patent application कर दिया था, right? But in the next say suppose 5 to 10 years, यानी जब तक patent से 20 years नहीं होते तो patent in some countries it is 15 years for patent, by the way. So as soon as the patent expires, then generic competition will be starting. So that drug will go into generic market, and every pharma company all around the world will try and synthesize the drug, make a formulation out of it, so that it is available as a generic drug for the people who are affected out of that particular disease or disorder. Okay, so that is what is patent protection expires and generic competition. So understand this thing. We started in the 0th year and पूरा process complete करते करते approximately 20-25 years निकल गए, right? So the actual profit start coming in only after the 15th-16th year. Okay, this is the time when the profits start coming in for drug discovery. So that is the reason why most of the newly discovered drugs, they tend to be very costly, because the pharma company or whosoever is involved in that drug discovery process will be, investing loads of money into this entire process for for approximately 15 to 17 years. Only after that they'll start getting reaping profits out of it. Okay, so that is how the timeline is for drug discovery. Okay, then from this table, the complexity of the task for finding new medications is readily apparent, right? So for example, we started with in the 0th year 20 years lag gaye, and then just look at the kind of team that we need a medicinal chemist, we need pharmacologist, we need pharmaceutics personnel, we need QA personnel, quality control, quality assurance personnel, right? So all that team has to be given regular salaries, right? And then regulatory approvals के लिए फीस भरना पड़ता है, and then FDA approval के लिए फीस होता है, clinical trials के लिए फीस होता है, right? So all of those charges are borne by the drug discovery company, and only after the drug becomes a blockbuster hit will the company reap benefits out of it, reap profits out of it. So that makes that shows us that the table shows us that the entire process is really complex. And once organizational and fiscal considerations have been accomplished, the project can begin. These decisions are non-trivial in a not common, and are usually made by the committees. So whether the given company should start with some other project or they should stick to the same project they have started with and wait for the entire project to be over. Now, those are the things that are decided by the committees, that the board of governors, etc. And they require a great deal of judgment because there are rarely enough resources and talents to do all the things that one would like to do. So, for instance, if a company wants to discover a new drug, now nowadays we know, someone joins a company, within 2 to 3 years they shift that company, right? So turnover बढ़ गया. People who are coming in new have to be trained again. So there are costs that are involved with that, right? So what happens is experienced people, if they come in, they will add to the team. But if some experienced people go, some person goes away, then that, kind of hampers the project a lot. Okay, because they have to teach the incoming person, even if that person is an experienced person, they have to teach them right from scratch. So that takes up lots of time. So that is the reason why, there are rarely enough resources and talents to do all the things that one would like to do. That is the statement that has been mentioned over there. Okay, the rewards for success are great, and the consequences for failure are often devastating. Like for instance, we have examples of so many vaccines, COVID vaccines. Okay, they have most of them have been successful without any kind of drawbacks or side effects, serious side adverse effects, right? So they have been successful. The companies which manufactured these vaccines have gone on to become, billion-dollar companies. But there are instances wherein failures have also set in. For example, COX-2 inhibitors, classic example, classic. Celecoxib, we know was the first drug that was discovered. So COX-2 inhibitors, you all know, right? We have studied in our B farms. So COX-2 inhibitors are those drugs which act against the COX-2 enzymes, and they act as very potent analgesics, okay, NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So the moment we have pain, even if it was an intense pain, COX-2 inhibitors were absolutely efficient, were absolutely potent in taking care of that pain. You know, they were the most potent. And then pharma companies started thinking as to, how they can maximize their profits. So at once, everyone started, putting their money into COX-2 inhibitors, and they started discovering COX-2 inhibitors. They started bringing those COX-2 inhibitors into the market without much of clinical trials. And what happened was, preclinical trials were done, but clinical trials were done, but to a reduced extent. And without safety data and all, without toxicity data, those toxic drugs, they came into the market. Like for example, those etoricoxibs, celecoxibs, rofecoxibs, etc. And when they were marketed, when they were consumed by patients, what was observed world over was people who took those coxibs, the COX-2 inhibitors, they went on to have heart-related issues. Many people died of heart attacks. And then, in those Western countries, they started suing the people. Okay, they started suing the pharma companies as to how can you market a drug which is causing heart attacks. So that happened because the clinical trials were inefficient to find out the toxicity related to heart tissues, right? So what happened? Please mute yourselves. Please mute yourselves. Someone is talking. Yeah. So what happened was, so all those pharma companies which brought those coxibs into the market, they all, were sued by people all over the world, and then they started, incurring losses. So that is what has been mentioned over here. So the rewards for success are great, but the consequences of failure are often devastating. So the moment that there is a failure, the pharma companies can go bankrupt as well, just paying the penalties that come out of the court cases. All right. So that's a classic example. And there are smaller firms which lack resources and work on specialized aspects. So these smaller firms are often the companies, the CROs, with which the larger pharma companies would work with. Okay, so ये जो for example अगर animal studies करना है, so why do the animal studies by themselves? Okay, so they can give those animal studies to some smaller CROs, contract research organizations, which can do those animal studies on behalf of those big pharma companies. And then what is going to happen? They are going to save on their time, their own resources. They don't have to recruit so much of personnel to work on the animal studies aspect, right? So what is going to happen? They are going to save money. At the same time, the smaller companies which are working on those specialized aspects, they are going to earn money. Okay, so those of you who are thinking of entrepreneurship as your career option, you all can think of this as an option. Okay, think of entrepreneurship. Think of starting a smaller company which can cater to the needs of larger pharma companies. Let that be research in terms of medicinal chemistry or pharmacology, that is animal studies, human studies, or maybe analysis, yani ki analytical method developments, or maybe formulation developments, right? So smaller companies can be formed on these aspects, and they can always work in collaboration with the larger companies. We had only manufacturing that was given to those smaller companies, but with the advent of CROs, contract research organizations, larger and larger amount of research work is also given out to those smaller companies. Okay, so that is one entrepreneurial option that you all should think of. Okay, then, whereas the large firms carry on drug discovery and development and the whole way from inception to marketing, यानी कि 0 years से 20 years तक सब कुछ ये large pharma companies कर सकते हैं, और उसके बीच में जो जो छोटे छोटे parts है, specialized aspects है, they can be done by those smaller firms. Okay, they may or may not be pharma companies per se. All right. Okay. So with this, we have finished off the economics of drug discovery. And in the coming lecture, we'll talk about what are drugs, what are targets, and what are druggable targets. And once we understand these three concepts, we'll be able to better understand what is drug design and specifically what is computer aided drug design. Okay. All right. Is that clear to all of you? Yeah. Thank you.